Hello and welcome to another StreetCones live stream, another Road to Change live stream. For those of you who don't know StreetCones, we're a charity who use the arts to affect positive change with a particular focus on film and theatre and lived experience. And we have been working over the last few months now with a group of Glasgow participants serving community sentences as an alternative to prison. With the support of our facilitators, they have devised a script, a story, a stage play, which they recently performed in front of an online audience of justice staff and partners and other facilitators. And one of the central themes that came out of that story and that script was suicide. And it wasn't planned, it's always organic. We always start with a blank page. We never know where it's going to go. But that's one of the themes that came out, and that's one of the that's why this Road to Change, this live stream is titled "A Suicide is Preventable." So we're going to have a look at the film that came out of that workshop. There's a kind of 10-minute edited film of the performance, and then afterwards we're going to have a panel discussion and a Q&A with some invited members and partners. So if you have any questions for us or any comments on the workshops, on the story that you're going to get an insight into, then use whatever platform you're on, whether it's Facebook, YouTube or Twitter. Get in touch with us at StreetCones and fire the questions to myself, and I'll help facilitate Q&A and discussion with the panel after the film. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over and we're going to have a look at this this film. The script was called Sink or Swim.
Go on, you listen to it?
You said you can't hear it.
No, today, no, but I've heard it before.
Do you know what it's saying?
No, exactly, but the gist. It's only up says one thing.
Tell you what, you can answer me this question. I promise I'm going to listen to it. If you can't, you need to promise to leave us alone.
That's no fair.
How's it no fair?
Because I was rubbish at school.
No school question.
Can I have a sports question?
We think this is the weakest link. No, you can't.
Alright, fine. What's the question?
And you agree to leave us alone if you don't know the answer? Oh, you hearing us?
Sorry. Aye, okay, go for it.
What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years?
This has been 12 weeks of so hard work from a big group of folk who've been involved in this online group work programme. And I know there's been a huge amount of folk who've put a lot of hard work and effort into this to get from what was essentially a blank piece of paper to this 30-minute story that had humour, poignancy, poetry, jokes, questions, everything thrown into the mix. And a great wee ending as well. I loved that twist at the end.
You tell me there was nothing up here for me. My mud put me out the house. I didn't have anywhere. I was just walking. It was like it was singing to me. Does it sound like that to you?
Aye, I suppose. It does sound like singing, aye.
Homelessness, what's it like? Rubbish, horrendous, shite, obviously.
Everything's heavy down this part. I feel like I've got a swinging bit for a heart.
It told me it was everybody else's fault. This was a way to hurt the world back.
No self-pity.
Nah, none of that. Anger, homelessness, cold. I was scared to go to sleep, scared of my nightmares, scared of my dreams.
All my life doors have been shut in my face, so you know what I did? Made my own door, made that metal, closed that door after he's more left, nobody else is getting in, not even him.
It told me I had lost it all. So now I had to take it and go back to the start. Tell you, it felt like I had a swinging brick for a heart and all.
Didn't listen.
Aye, I did, but somebody saved me. Life is full of risks and fears, doubts, tears and laughter. You've written your last chapter.
You some kind of poet or what? You clearly didn't write your last chapter, you're still in here.
Something happened, I can't explain it. I answered in my voice, but the words weren't mine. Or maybe they were my words, but the voice wasn't mine, I can't remember. Anyway, what it said was this: I want away from this lifestyle, but I know it's going to take a while. Hopefully one day I'll be back on track, never have to look back. Time to catch a breath, a fresh start. I realise now in the ways I need to be smart. My horns may be cold, I've got a warm heart. I may be homeless, but I'm not hopeless.
Obviously, I've not really done it with this, and I've with confidence in that and talking around for people you don't know. It's quite a good experience then, actual seeing stuff that you've put down on paper, getting other people to actually see what you've actually worked on and like you're actually doing something. You're not just sitting on a camera looking at it, you're actually making something work, you're making a story up. You know what I mean?
Imagine I'm him, storing here. Go ahead, say it.
Don't be daft.
Come on, do it. You need to be self-conscious in front of a complete stranger, especially a waste of space like me.
It's not the same.
What's the harm? Do it. Come on, man. Life's too fucking short. Say it.
Christ. I love you. I fucking love you, son. Alright?
Right. There, you see? That wasn't so hard, was it?
It's a really good demonstration of what we're trying to do with unpaid work. It isn't just about getting folks through their hours, doing squad placements and all that sort of stuff. It's about trying to think creatively about other opportunities that we can give folk to build their skills, develop their self-esteem, develop their self-confidence, and see that there's other things out there that you're good at. You know, you've obviously got a lot of strengths here.
As facilitators, like me and Mark, Neil and Anne, our job is just to kind of lasso the ideas, let the guys come up with stuff, and then we'll just kind of lasso a little bit and pull that down, and and then we just kind of try and shape it all, basically, and then we'll read it and go, that doesn't really gel, does it? We'll just take that bit out. That other bit that you said last week, though, that makes sense, so we'll pull that in,
Usually we kind of work orders, you'd be out and about, and once you've kind of done your business, that's you go back in and wait until next week. But I'm pretty, I've heard it from other guys that even though the session's finished, they're still thinking about the piece, they're still thinking about the characters and their journeys. They won't be with us until next week, but each day it plays in their mind, and they're not getting hours off for that. So when they come back and you see that they've come in with a thought and they've went, I've been thinking about this, you go, okay, we never discussed that in the last session. So what's happened from the last session until now? They've been thinking about that. Now, they won't get the hours off, and that's certainly not what they're saying. But the fact that this is sitting with them and they're going through life on a daily basis, and all of a sudden this comes into their head, means that they're so totally invested in it. So new ideas are being brought to the table, and when there's a new idea, that's a great surprise, because we're like, yes, give us it. That's a nugget that we can play about with.
Use creativity as a vehicle for change, hence the title, Road to Change. And so we're asking people to come into a space with us that is unusual, they've never maybe done before. They've been given an order that they would expect perhaps to be picking litter or out painting fences, which is all valuable stuff as well, but we're asking them to come in, and at first that might be considered as like, well, that's just a soft option, and then we start mining their emotions and their motivations and some of their choices and things like that, and lived experience starts to come forward. But even though we use the protection of fiction, lived experience comes into it. And so they're asking things of themselves that are difficult. So I'm surprised like every week that as the guys come forward and as we do exercises, they keep coming back and they keep coming back, and they're getting something from it and they're growing from it. And we've got, in some of the other workshops, I believe there's people who have finished their order, but they're still coming back into the session because they're getting something from it. So that's a huge surprise.
I'd like to think of myself as a participating audience member, but I think if there's some people out there that could even this specific play, that it might hit home and make them feel things and think things before anything really happens.
Yeah, exactly, Christopher. That's what I mean about the ripple effect. That it's not what they have created. You know, the piece of work they've created isn't just valuable to the participants. It's valuable to a wider audience afterwards, and they'll all have a copy of this script to take away with them and share with people. And so yeah, there's huge benefits for all.
Yeah, can I just add one more thing to that? That say had it been in an ideal world and we did get to, so we have got this read through and people are getting to see it, but if we made this into a film, it'd be put onto a platform where people who aren't family members or friends, have any connection to any one of us, would see this down south in any other countries, and it could have something that connects them to it and make them think twice or make them reevaluate things. And then there we go. There's another person who's took something from it and has changed in some form or another.
I learned a lot about myself being on StreetCones, to be honest. I know I didn't do much of the reading and that, but I'm sure I done other stuff to hopefully get people exercising that.
You were a very good contributor, and that's the thing with these workshops, and we say that right from the start. They are, you know, they should never be stressful. Yes, they ask stuff of people, but there's there shouldn't be a pressured environment. And you were really good at all the creative exercises that we did. And it was fine that you never felt like confident to read, but you always contributed to the workshops. You were always an active member of them. And we've had, for those caseworkers and other people who are viewing this for the first time, each group consists of various different people. Like any production, you'd have people in the background, you've got people who maybe contribute ideas, you have people who do the lighting or the directing, and they feel they can contribute ideas, but they don't feel they can perform. And so there's space for all kinds of people in this. Like Mark said, or Anne said, we're not trying to create actors. God forbid, there's enough of them already. Yeah, and it's a very crowded marketplace. Okay, I'm struggling.
Jobs out there,
I don't need these guys coming in and making it harder for me.
Huge implications for people that have not been able to leave the house, not been able to socialise, and maybe this is the way forward for people on these kind of things. You know what I mean? That they can get out and, like you said, it evolves. It brings on their social skills, gets them talking to people. You can let them see talents and be hidden things that they've never knew were there.
Yeah.
So it's. Although the unpaid work has its benefits to society, things getting done, things that need done, this I feel is more nurturing for people. Do you know what I mean?
I know. I would just like to thank you all as well. It's been very enjoyable to take part in it. You know, it's we've discovered things and overcame barriers, etc. It's been enjoyable being part of it. You know.
Yeah. Well, it's been
I like the storming the ideas part. You know, getting ideas across and seeing other people's points of view on it. I thought that was very. It opened my eyes to things. You know.
Fucking M.
Clive looks at him like he's maybe made the wrong choice here and is bringing a lunatic home.
You alright, son? Take your meds today?
The answer to your question, it comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years. It is, innit? The letter fucking M.
Aye, son. Maybe your nose daft you look after all.
Hello, all who watched that, and that was the first time I was able to watch that full edit as well. And I have to say, I found it a bit really moving to see that. To see that after 12 weeks of work, see that encapsulated in that kind of wee 10-minute film there was made me choke up a wee bit. So on with the event. So today's event has been delivered by ourselves, StreetCones, on behalf of Glasgow Justice. So before I introduce you to the full panel that we've got with us today, I want to introduce you first to Stephen McVey, who is the Service Manager for North East Criminal Justice. He would be good for him to say a few words about the work and the journey that we've been on. Hi, Stephen. How you getting on?
Hi, Adam. How you doing?
Very good, thank you. Very good. So yeah, it's you've been with us right from the start. We've just finished a second module. This was the very first module. How have you found it as somebody who's been championing this alongside ourselves? What's it been like for you to see people go through this process with us?
I think, as I said on the film there, it was really fantastic to see the finished product at the end of the first 12-week module. When we kind of set it up at the beginning, we didn't know how it was going to turn out. As you said, it was essentially people starting with a blank piece of paper, and at the end of that 12 weeks, to have such a creative and imaginative script that dealt with quite hard-hitting issues like suicide and self-harm and adult mental health. It was really fantastic to see. And I suppose as we got to the end of the first module, that's when we had those discussions about doing a performance of the script, which was challenging. And I think, for the guys involved to put themselves out there, kind of performing, as it were, via Teams, which is a new platform for a lot of people. We're all struggling to get our heads around this new world we live in, where everything's online these days.
Yeah.
But for them to step forward and really put themselves out there, I thought was really brave and fantastic. And I think they did a great job on the day. And you saw some of that in the short film there. But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. Obviously, when we started having these discussions towards the end of last year, we were keen to consider how we might move the workshops that you guys have been delivering for a while in person to a more kind of online platform, and how we might use that towards kind of other activity, unpaid workers. And the feedback so far has been absolutely fantastic. The guys who have been involved in these groups have spoken very highly of their experience, and we'll hear from one of the guys today in terms of his experience. But yeah, the feedback has been great so far. As you said, we're now just completed module 2, and we had the live performance of that script just a couple of weeks ago. And again, completely different to the one that we've just kind of heard a little bit about there. But again, so creative and so imaginative, really interesting. And we've got another 2 modules to go. So we have commissioned another 2 modules from StreetCones, which will take us up to March 2022, possibly, and possibly beyond. We need to wait and see. But yeah, it's been a great experience so far, and I think we'll maybe talk about this later today. But the feedback and the outcomes from the people involved have been so positive. It's been great to see.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most. I think that's what moves me most. Seeing that clip back again is that with Mark, for example, and Bob, who was in there, and these are people who have never been in a creative space like this before. More often than not, very rarely is there somebody who might say, "Oh, I did a bit of drama in school," but that's the exception, not the rule. It's just these are people who've never had access to a creative space, and I've often thought that when we've done all of our prison work in the past, we've done loads of work in Shotts and Greenock and Low Moss and places like that, and we're working with people who've never had access to this creative space, and you wonder how many people wouldn't be here working with us if they'd had access to this creative space all those years ago, and we're able to maintain access to it. So I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that this kind of work is a lifesaver and can be a lifesaver for people. So let me introduce the rest of the panel. I'll introduce them one by one, and then we'll just have a big chat. So in no real order, if we can have Pauline Toner come in. She's from Glasgow City Suicide. She's the Glasgow City Suicide Prevention Coordinator. Pauline, how you doing?
Hi everybody. Good afternoon. I'm the coordinator for the multi-agency suicide prevention work in Glasgow City, and very pleased to be part of the panel today.
Great. Well, welcome. And we've also got Gary McDonald from MindtheMen, which is a suicide prevention peer support group. Gary, come on into the room. How are you?
I'm good, Adam. Thanks for inviting me today. It's good to be here and just to hear what's been happening. Yeah, we're a peer support group. We're based in Glasgow. We've got 2 clubs based in that, and a virtual club as well online. And it's about providing a safe place for guys to talk about their challenges, be listened to and feel supported. Outreach to reduce male suicide. Sadly, 75% of suicides are men. So as your stats showed in the clip there, you know, they're still too high. 833 in 2019. So we need to do things to affect that and bring that down. So thanks for being
with us, Gary. And then last but not least, I'd love to introduce Joe, who is one of our participants who you saw in the film there and who's been with us now. He's now just been involved in the second module as well and been an amazing contributor. So Joe, welcome into the space. Give us some, say hi, just so make sure we've got your audio.
Oh, very sorry, I had my mic on. How are you doing, everybody?
Welcome, thanks, Joe. So, listen, I'd love to start off with yourself, Joe. We've had some questions via Facebook and YouTube, and for anybody who's still with us out there watching, please get your questions on whatever platform you're on, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter at StreetCones. Fire your questions over to us. But there's a really good one here from Margaret Court on YouTube. Amazing work by participants. What did Joe learn by doing this process, and how has it affected his journey with offending or reoffending? So that's a really good question. I mean, there's people out there who do say, why are people, who've committed crimes doing this kind of work? And there's some people that really, they want to look for an answer for that. So Joe, you're best positioned to answer that.
It's a really broad question, Adam, but I'll try. It affects you in so many different ways, it really does. I think the main thing is a bit of stability, a bit of something to direction, maybe a time you have to be there to do it at a certain time. So it gives you a bit of structure. You need to be there to do that for that time. Then once you start going, more for the times you meet the people, you think these are nice guys. These are doing good things here, and the other participants in it. It was so real. It was like a surreal experience, mate, to be actually take the journey with you all, to get the things that came from it. So much, I wouldn't know where to begin. But like I say, a wee bit of structure, a bit of direction and things like that for somebody who never had anything, lying in my bed to 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the day. So it gives you time. You need to be there, things you need to do, need to be on camera, you need to clean yourself up a bit,
Yeah.
So definitely a lot of good benefits from it.
And I think one of the things that came out of the chat we had the other day at the end of the second module, when we had a big group discussion, and it was part of the debrief as well, is that, to kind of answer Margaret's question a bit more, like these guys report, and girls often report, that what they have contributed to is the construction of something valuable. When they're out in the community, they're doing something valuable. Yes, they're cleaning up parks, they're painting community centre fences, they're building picnic benches. But with this, they've built a story. They've started from nothing, and they have built a story that will last now. It's kind of immortal. They've either got a hard copy of the script at the end of the project, or they've got a copy on their device that will last, and this recording will last. And so the ripple effect of that, the product that they've built, that they've had to pull out of themselves through creative work, some of which is uncomfortable for people, some of which asks things of themselves creatively that they, like John who spoke there, who never felt confident to read, but was an amazing contributor throughout the workshop, was really each time felt the nerves, felt like he had to, really dig deep to bring stuff into the workshop. And that sometimes I like to refer to, where for the people that might say, I'd rather they were out picking litter, I think these workshops are like picking litter, but it's picking litter of the mind. That's my metaphor for it anyway. So listen, there's another question here I think I'll maybe direct this one to yourself, Gary, from Jackie Simpson on Facebook. Why is it men in particular who the stats indicate are more likely to take their own life?
It's very complex, I think, but I think societal, just the way that men, especially men in the west of Scotland, have been brought up over the years, and it's just the kind of it's maybe been shunned upon. Men may talk about feelings and their emotions, and be a big man, be a hard man, and sadly that stopped men from sharing, and many men will live the whole life without being diagnosed with any issues or getting the help that they actually need. So I think a combination of society and even parenting as well over the years, we have to look back. I remember reading about after the war, people coming back from the Second World War, and really through such a traumatic time, people didn't really want to sort of stop about how they were struggling. They wanted to rebuild the country and move on, and maybe that's part of it. And then through generations, maybe fathers have not been able to talk to their sons, and that's gone on and on. And you've got men who just have this built up, feelings, that they're not able to actually deal with, which sadly can lead to suicide at times. So it's very complex. That's just a kind of a narrow answer there. That's maybe some way of thinking about it, where maybe more women's groups are maybe able to share things better. Maybe women are more able to ask for help as well and seek help. I think only 36% of the NHS talking services are used by men. So there's a lot of work, a lot of stigma and discrimination around about suicide and mental health. So there's a lot of work to be done. And this kind of project for me is fantastic because it just gets people talking, and having that conversation can just spread, and it can make you realise that you're not alone in how you feel. And I think that's probably what some of the guys have felt doing this. And I hope it's made them seek other help. And I think maybe for their family and friends to see this, will maybe actually help people to talk about it and the taboo of suicide.
Yeah. I think we are moving in the right direction. I'm going to bring Pauline in a minute on this topic as well, but we are moving in the right direction in terms of the communication. Like when I was at school, I never heard the phrase mental health. That didn't exist. The phrase mental health. Nobody cared about mental health. I grew up in the north coast of Scotland, and like many communities around Scotland that were either agricultural or industrial communities, where it was all about just producing, just get on, plough that field, work on that steel, mine that coal, whatever it was. There's no time for how you're feeling, and we still have a hangover of that, and it does make it difficult for people to speak about how they feel. But there's no question that when you do, and when men do, it can be a lifeline, and it can be the difference. It can literally be the difference between life and death. Pauline, do you want to come in on that? Oh, so Gary.
Absolutely.
Paul.
No, I was just going to say absolutely. I just schools nowadays have more support for young people. There's much more education now about mental health from primary schools right through, which is fantastic. And I know that places like workplaces and organisations support people with some training, like Pauline might talk more about that, about safe talk and assist and suicide awareness sessions. So it's out there. It's just connecting people and creating this discussion and encouraging people to talk.
Yeah. Pauline, did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, it's really just to add to what's already been said. I mean, there's been multi-agency work going on for years, nationally and locally, to try and prevent suicide. But the figure of 75% of deaths by suicide are men, it's been that way for quite a while. It's been that way for quite a long time. And I think there is this perception out there, as Gary says, there's this perception out there, this sense that, men can't talk about their feelings, men don't talk to each other. And yes, we know from evidence that women are more likely to go to a doctor, women are more likely to go to counselling services compared to men. But it's also possible that it's a misperception as well, because when men get the opportunity, they do talk to each other. And Gary's group is an excellent example of that, because I remember when I met Gary and he told me about the very first session, they didn't know what was going to happen, if anybody would turn up. And I think he said over 30 men turned up that night, a venue in Partick. And that's great. And the thing about the work that this group of guys have done it's another great piece of work where, you know, these guys have been brought together, they've been given this opportunity, they've started working on this theme, and they have talked to each other, and they've demonstrated that they can talk to each other. So, you know, it's a really valuable addition to what is out there in terms of, you know, suicide prevention resources, I think. So I really welcome it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think when given the invitation, you can't sometimes get men to shut up, you know, but it's creating that space, isn't it? That safe space where they feel it because they've been either consciously or unconsciously directed away from speaking. You know, it's the whole boys don't cry thing. And if any of the men here, I'm sure we've all heard that in our past, is be wished. And where I grew up, it was be wished. Nobody's interested in your, you know, how you feel. And it's breaking that stigma. But Pauline, while I've got you here, so there's a question here from Stacey Duncan on Twitter. I didn't even know Glasgow had a suicide prevention strategy. How long has it been active, and what type of work do they do?
Well, actually, nationally, there's been a suicide prevention strategy for many years, going all the way back to 2002. And there is a national suicide prevention group and a national suicide prevention action plan. And most local authorities in Scotland do have someone who is the suicide prevention coordinator, it's quite often a planning role, whose job it is to bring all those agencies together, like health and social work and police, etc., to look at how they work together to try and improve their services, to try and reduce deaths by suicide, and also link to the third sector. So we've had a multi-agency group in Glasgow for years. We've had it was re-established a number of years ago, and it's bigger than it's ever been. And some of the work that we do is up until the pandemic started. You know, as the video said, every year we're training approximately 1,000 people in Glasgow in suicide prevention, and that's not just the public sector or health services. It's third sector, it's community organisations, it's construction workers working in the building industry. So we've now got online options available because the face-to-face training isn't currently available, and we hope to start that soon. But we also, a huge part of the job is to raise awareness with people that suicide is preventable, and there are resources out there, because again, people think that there aren't resources out there. So one of the difficult jobs for us is to try and get that information across, that there are resources out there that people can, and men can go to as well, like Breathing Space and MindtheMen. There's an organisation called Lifelink in Glasgow, which provides free counselling to anybody with a Glasgow postcode for people in serious distress. So, anything that helps us to get the information out there, and bring it to people's attention, is to be welcomed. And I can provide information for participants today, on the services that are out there. That's not to say that there are enough services, and that we don't need more services. We will always need more in terms of trying to prevent suicide. We are not at the stage where we can say we're on top of this, because we're not. We can always improve.
Yeah. Stephen, I've got a question for you, but there's a quick one that I think I can answer just beforehand. Janice Cook has asked on Facebook, was suicide theme selected in advance of the 12-week workshop, and how did the group decide to use that theme? So Janice, no, we didn't. Nothing is ever planned in advance. We start with a blank page and we never know where it's going to go. So we discuss, we do creative exercises, improvisations with the participants. We see what themes bubble up to the surface and emerge. And then the facilitators, in this case was myself, Anne, Neil, at various points throughout the 12 weeks, will just try and help harness their ideas and put them into some kind of shape. But we never start with a pre-planned. We just never know which way it's going to go. So for you, Stephen, Elizabeth Wright on Twitter asks, when restrictions lift, will workshops end and be replaced by the usual type of manual work we associate with community service? I think it's been kind of answered, but I thought it's probably a good opportunity for you, Stephen.
I suppose the first thing to say is that we never planned on these workshops replacing the kind of manual work that people are referring to. So that has always continued to run, albeit some of the lockdown periods they had to stop, obviously due to kind of COVID restrictions. Those now back up and running, and they have been for a number of weeks now, as well as the various personal placements that we use within Glasgow, like charity shops, community centres, resource centres for older people, etc. So those are now back up and running, and these workshops are used, or should be seen as, providing people with other activity opportunities. So as part of an unpaid work requirement, a portion of your hours, up to a maximum of 30, could be used for other activity, which is about trying to link people in with other supports or services that might benefit them, might improve their aspects of their life and their well-being, like mental health, physical health. If there's addiction issues or homelessness issues, it's about trying to address those needs so that by the time someone's finished their unpaid work requirement, they're in a better place than when they started. And as Joe touched on earlier on, these modules are a real opportunity to get folk together to look at things like stability, consistency, routine, a bit of direction. I think the social aspect can't be ignored either. We had people in the previous group talking about the fact that they were given opportunities to meet up with the same group of people every week and build relationships, which, as we know, people have been fairly socially isolated over the past year or so because of the pandemic. So it was about trying to address those needs, but still have your kind of, more regular unpaid work opportunities sitting alongside that. And as I said earlier on, the plan is that we will continue to provide these modules over the next 6 to 9 months anyway, and possibly beyond. What I would say is, but there's an evaluation of the group work modules taking place. So Strathclyde University are doing an evaluation of a lot of online opportunities that we've put in place over the past year, just to see what the learning is, what the feedback is from people who've been involved in them, and see what we can take forward into the future. But as I said earlier on, the feedback from clients, I've had clients actually phone up to speak to me directly saying, "You've got to keep this going. It was great. You can't pull this back now. It's too good an opportunity." And that, I can assure you, that very rarely happens in my line of work. So it's been really great, the feedback.
Great. Got one here from, this might be for you, Gary, although Pauline, you might want to weigh in on this as well. Natalie Hume on YouTube. Have the suicide stats increased as a result of the pandemic and the restrictions? I suppose, Pauline, you go first with that one.
So in terms of the statistics for the numbers of deaths by suicide in relation to the pandemic, the official statistics for death by suicide, the most up-to-date figures that we have are for 2019. They're pre-pandemic. So the pandemic statistics for deaths by suicide, they haven't been published yet. They're not available. However, what we do know from some research work that has been done so far, and from looking at some of our real-time data, is that what we are actually not so far seeing an increase in the numbers of deaths by suicide over and above what we would normally expect as the rate for that year. And I think people will be surprised to hear that. That may change. It may well change, but certainly from what we know, from what's been looked at in 2020 so far, we haven't so far seen an increase in numbers of deaths. However, what is being experienced is an increase in the numbers of people seeking help and the numbers of people who are reporting that they're feeling suicidal, and an increase in the numbers of people contacting the Samaritans, for example. So we are seeing an increase in in the numbers of people who are experiencing mental health problems and experiencing distress, but we've not yet got the solid data that tells us about deaths. So far, it's not looking as if the numbers of deaths have gone up yet in relation to that.
No. Gary, do you want to weigh in on that one? Have you seen an increase maybe in referrals to MindtheMen?
Yeah, I think what certainly the pandemic's done, if there's one good thing to come out of this, is it's raised a lot more awareness about mental health and suicide. And as Pauline said, you know, there's been a large increase in people now being more aware of the help that's out there, and I think that's been kind of sort of well publicised over the last year. So we certainly have seen an increase in people contacting us for support, and we've seen a lot of new members just over the last year or so. We had to, obviously, during the initial pandemic lockdown, we had to move online, which was difficult, but we then were able to come out of that and reopen the clubs. So we've had to increase our availability, having an online session along with 2 physical club meetings now. And we're getting new guys coming every week to join the club. You know, so coming on to something like this is great, just to make more people aware that there's other peer support groups out there. We're just an example of one of them, but there are lots of peer support groups, and you know, it's non-clinical. It's about creating a safe space for people to come together and share their challenges and really feel listened. And sometimes it's so hard to talk about these issues with your closest and your family and people that you're closest to. So being able to come, a bit like what you've done here, with guys coming from different parts of the city, whatever, and coming together, maybe not always knowing each other, and being able to talk about these big topics, has shown that everybody's maybe struggling at times, and it's okay to talk about it, and things can be better. And we generally find when men come through our doors, it's hard getting through the door. As Pauline said, the very first night we opened 3 years ago, 35 guys turned up, so we knew there was a need for this kind of session. But guys struggle sometimes getting through the door, but when they do come in, they very quickly realise it's a safe place, and once they start talking, it starts to come out. And do you know what? It's not about us as a club helping or fixing people. It's about them themselves realising things that they can do to support themselves, which is a great thing to see and move forward and go in different paths. So yeah, that's definitely more awareness, definitely still needed at all times though. But I think something like this is fantastic to kind of encourage more people to seek help.
Yeah. Joe, I've got a question for you on this. You know, these workshops obviously have, as we answered before, suicide wasn't planned. It just kind of came organically out of the group. So this, you know, you're representing the participants today, the kind of the voice of the participants. So this is not specifically to you or doesn't talk to your lived experience, but had you ever done anything like this kind of workshop before? And so it's in 2 parts, this question. Had you ever done anything like this previously? And now, having done it, do you think you would seek to do this kind of stuff, not necessarily this creative stuff, but do you think you would seek the kind of support that perhaps Gary's MindtheMen offers, or various types of group? Would it make that easier for you to do?
Aye. It certainly gave me more information about it all. I was never aware there was things like that available to men, though. And I think a lot of men, especially when about where we live in the west coast of Scotland and that, are under the same impression. They don't get the information needed, you know. They don't know that these organisations are there, and how available they are, you know, how approachable as well, to be honest, you know. Having only met Gary a couple of times, he's a really nice fella, and it's a great thing he's doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
About the workshops and that, the work groups, like you says, it came up organic. It was never kind of directed in that way. I feel as if just the work group itself, interacting with other members, speaking to the people, as I said earlier, about making sure you were there at a certain time and meeting the same faces and that, we got very familiarised, almost built up with a friendship with people. And I think that alone as well is really good for people's mental health, especially in the current climate and all that, you know. I reckon a lot of participants would have got really good benefits, mental well-being, from the groups, you know, participating in them like that.
Yeah.
So I certainly feel as if it opened my eyes to a lot of things, especially about men's mental health, you know. A lot of things that I wasn't aware about, you know. And again, like with the clubs and that, the things Gary does. So it was all good. There was really nothing bad could be taken from it, you know.
Yeah. But not even what some of my jokes or like some of my like daft quizzes
No.
and riddles that I put out. There's no
We could
negatives
even
at
put up
all.
with them, Adam. You know, we could even put up with them. A lot of the riddles were very thought-provoking. No, it was really, it was certainly it wasn't just a challenge of yourself, it was a challenge of the grey matter, you know.
Yeah.
Certainly letting something settle, and then that moment of euphoria when you realise, you know, yeah, that's what it is, you know, you really are literally screaming the answer for the hilltops, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's really good.
Thanks, Joe. So this one is probably for you, Stephen. This is via Twitter from @LookingThinking on Twitter. Do Glasgow Justice refer all community sentence participants? What's the criteria for selecting participants?
We don't really have a criteria for selecting participants. A lot of it's about trying to hook people into these opportunities. I think, as you touched on earlier on, Adam, not a lot of the guys that we are working with will have had an experience of doing kind of creative arts. A lot of the individuals we work with are maybe quite resistant to trying out these new things, these new opportunities. But you use I suppose there's a bit of a carrot there in terms of getting your hours down by using some of these opportunities to have your other activity hours reduced. And what we tend to see is, you know, go along and try it, and if you don't like it, you're not required in the same sense that you are in terms of turning up at your work placement. If you don't like it, you don't need to go back. But it's very often, once people attend that, you know, first couple of sessions, they're hooked. And as Joe said there, they're getting quite a lot out of it in terms of the social aspect of it, developing friendships, and really starting to challenge maybe some of their thinking and their thought processes. So as I said, the feedback's been really positive. But no, we don't have a set criteria. We would just try and link people in who are keen to take up these opportunities. Some of the individuals we work with want to just get their hours done as quickly as possible, so they'll go out in a squad placement, you know, 2 or 3 times a week just to try and get through their hours. Others, you know, for various reasons, are more open to trying these opportunities. And as Joe touched on there, you can see the benefits at the end of that 12-week process.
Yeah. Stephen, this is sorry to give you more of the spotlight than anyone else, but there's another question that's probably directed towards you, although maybe some of the other guys could weigh in on this as well. This is from Kevin McVey. I hope no relation, Stephen, on YouTube, unless your family are tuning in. StreetCones are amazing. I wish it was offered to me years ago when I was in trouble, before I wasted so much of my life in jail. Does Stephen, and I suppose does Glasgow Community Justice, do any of this type of work preventatively, or is it all after offences have been committed?
So just now, the StreetCones and other online group activities we've got are for people who are subject to community payback orders. So it is, you know, post sentence, post conviction. We don't have anything set up just now that would kind of kick in preventatively. One of the areas we are trying to develop is looking at kind of diversion schemes. So diversion from prosecution, which is about trying to divert predominantly young people out of the criminal justice system, and looking at what supports we can offer at that stage. And there might be that we look at these kind of opportunities for people going through that system. But just now, the way it's been set up, it is for people who are subject to community payback orders.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin, StreetCones, we've been working since 2014, and we are, you know, constantly trying to reach as many people as we can. We've been lucky enough to work in a lot of the prisons and with young people, hopefully before they enter the criminal justice system. We've worked with young people down in Govan, young people in Barrhead and East Wren, and as far away as Orkney at times. We've got a project on at the moment, I believe, with East Ayrshire, with some young people down there. So we are, you know, we so keen on trying to do as much preventative work as we can, and just adjust that balance so it's not all after the event. But there's a question for you, Gary, from Kim Pringle on Facebook. I'd like to hear more from Gary about why MindtheMen was set up, and who was Grant MacDonald. Are you able to talk about that? Why was MindtheMen set up?
Yeah, I can share that. Yeah, I'm happy to share. So Grant McDonald was my cousin, and we lost Grant to suicide in April 2018. And I suppose MindtheMen started because we, as a family, wanted to do something because it was such a huge loss and it was a lot of pain for all of us. And we really looked about to see really what was there for men, you know, in the Glasgow area. You know, what was there just for guys? What could encourage guys to kind of open up and talk? And there wasn't really much, you know, that would allow these guys to come together, and maybe things that were there weren't working as well as they could have been. So yeah, we started the club after doing some research, looking at other clubs throughout the country and the north of England, and visiting other clubs to see what they did. And we started our club on the 3rd of September 2018. And as I said earlier, you know, the very first night we were unsure who would turn up, and we'd advertised on Facebook and some posters up in the kind of area. We were based in the Partick Cricket Club in the West End. And the very first night the doors opened, 35 guys came through the door. You know, so we knew straight away there was need for this. And what we do is it's not just a free-for-all, it's a very structured meeting that we have on a Monday night. We facilitators at each of the clubs. There's 7 facilitators in total. We ask 6 questions. We ask 6 questions over the 2 hours that we meet the guys on a Monday. There's certain things we don't talk about in MindtheMen, because it's west of Scotland. We don't talk about football. Even after last night, we can't talk about football. We don't talk about religion, because it's west of Scotland. We don't talk about politics. And we don't talk about medication because we're not medical experts, so we can't share that kind of advice. And we ask 6 questions through the night, so it's structured so each of the men in the group can answer the questions as we go around the circle. We used to pass a rugby ball or a football around the circle, so when you had the ball, you speak and everybody else listens. When you don't have the ball, you listen. We can't pass the ball at the moment because of COVID, obviously, so we just pass it around. We give a wee fist bump as we pass on to the next person. If you don't want to talk, it's absolutely fine. Sometimes the guys come for the first time and don't say a lot in the first couple of questions, but very quickly they generally join in and want to share and start to open up. And it's that opening up, and you'll see men who maybe haven't spoke for 20, 30 years coming. Often it's wives, girlfriends, partners that have pushed them to come. And when they start to open up, it comes out. And it's just like it's a moment, and it's quite a special thing to see because we know the guy's then going to start getting better, and he's going to start, you know, finding the right road to kind of help himself. And as Joe was saying, you know, you build a community, you build friendships, you have people's social skills improve. There's less isolation. We also provide outside the Monday night activities for the guys. Now, what we're doing this year is 21 and 21, so we're trying to do 21 activities for the guys. Coming up, we've got a fishing trip on Sunday. We've got a football tournament in August. We've got some gigs we're attending later on. We're doing a cycle to Edinburgh. We've done art classes, so we try and do creative things like yourself. We've had yoga instructors. We've been doing a really successful CBT class, cognitive behavioural therapy, which is giving the guys the tools to kind of change their thinking and change their behaviours. So we try and do all these things as well. So yeah, so that's a Monday night is a talking group, 2 hours, really supportive. And then the activities we try and do every month, at least one a month, for the guys to get together from all the 3 clubs and experience something and have some fun and find, you know, things that they enjoy doing, and just build these connections. And it's certainly working, you know, we're certainly seeing a huge difference, but it's all about the awareness, you know, and it's just encouraging people. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We've got a website as well if anybody's looking for more information, which I'm sure you'll share at the end of this. Yeah. So that's a wee bit of history. So from what the guys often say to me is, you know, they didn't know Grant, they didn't know my cousin Grant, but from what happened to Grant, they've stayed alive. So, you know, it's hard for the family, but we know that through that loss, you know, a lot of men have lived. So that's who Grant was.
Yeah. That's brilliant, thanks, Gary. We've got a question here again. I think it's for you, really, Stephen. Brian Devlin on Twitter. Has Stephen met any pushback from public or courts around this type of work as being soft on crime? That's a question that often comes up with this type of work. And I mean, I've certainly got an answer, but Stephen, yeah, have you met any pushback from public or courts for this kind of work?
No. I suppose that's the easy answer. No, we haven't. We haven't had any pushback from public. The courts are aware of, you know, some of these opportunities that we provide to the individuals we're working with, and again, there's been no issues there. I think it's that idea of being soft on crime. It's about trying to strike a balance with a CPO. So you do have those kind of more formal work placements where people are, as you said, Adam, going out maybe clearing a public park or painting a fence or working in a charity shop, but balancing that with the need to try and improve the well-being of the individuals we're working with, because we know longer term that actually reduces the chance of them getting into further problems later on in life. So no, we haven't had any pushback. I don't know if you yourself would maybe want to add a bit to that.
Yeah, no, it's not pushback as such, but these workshops actually came, if we track it all the way back, we made a film for myself and Mark McNichol in the back office here. We made a film about community payback orders called Something to Lose. I think it was the year before last, and that was really exploring the benefits of community payback orders, some of the history of a community payback order, but the narrative part of it looked at the story of a day in the life, if you like, of a young man, James, who thought he was going to get a custodial sentence and ended up getting a community payback order. And that looked at that perception in the public that this community payback is somehow soft. And Humza Yusuf, the then Justice Minister at the time, was questioned on this when we interviewed him. And he very articulately was able to demonstrate that we need to move away from this idea of hard and soft justice. It's about what works. And people people who have committed offences via this method of correction, I suppose, they don't lose the community payback orders, they don't lose their tenancy, they don't lose their family functionality, they're able to maintain a job usually, and they're able to kind of contribute at the same time as paying back. And there's all kinds of ways of paying back. There's physical stuff out in the community, but this kind of stuff, as I think Joe explained really well, is like the benefits are huge and often not very visible, like mental health itself. Somebody's got a broken leg, we can see that and we know how to handle it. But if someone's got a broken heart or a broken head in some way, it's much more difficult to tackle that. And these kinds of works and the kind of stuff that Gary and Pauline are involved in is all about finding those other solutions, because there cannot be a one size fits all, can there?
Yeah.
And hard justice, locking everybody up, is not going to create the kind of society that any of us are going to benefit from.
And I think, as you say, Adam, the evidence tells us that short-term prison sentences don't work as well as community sentences in terms of trying to reduce reoffending rates. They're just not as effective. So it is about trying to think about what actually works here to address those needs, address those issues, to make someone less likely to be involved in those types of behaviours moving forward. But there's also massive financial benefits to the community as well. Community Justice Glasgow estimated that through one of the providers alone, unpaid work contributed about £1 million worth of benefit to Glasgow in 2019, I think it was, just with the amount of hours that were put in terms of, like we were saying, those kind of big scale projects like clearing a park or painting a fence, clearing a community centre. And that's got tangible benefits for the community. People feed back that they now feel safer in a park because an area has been cleared back, it's not as overgrown, it's not as, it doesn't put them off visiting the area. So people are actually seeing the tangible benefits of people doing unpaid work in their community. Whereas if someone's sitting in prison for 3 or 6 months, you don't get any of that return. So it is about thinking about what works as opposed to soft versus hard justice. Absolutely.
Yeah, and for anyone who's interested, that film exists on the StreetCones website, streetcones.org. on the roadworks tab of our website are a lot of the films that we've made, but that community payback order film, Something to Lose, is there, and a lot of the stats that Stephen's just been talking about are in that film. It's a short film, but it's a very good one, very powerful one. So I don't think we need to keep you guys here for much longer, but there's a question I think is probably really good for us to start to wrap things up on, and it's from Big Nori on Twitter. What can we do to help? If we have a friend or family member who is struggling but not talking, what can we do as if they're not talking, we don't know? So what can we do in that kind of situation? Pauline, I suppose you can come in on that one.
So earlier I was asked the question about, what work is going on in the city, and I talked about the national programme and the multi-agency group in the city, and over and above the training and over and above letting people know what resources are out there, or trying to let people know what resources are out there, because I'm obviously hearing that still a lot of people aren't hearing or seeing it. The other message we need to put out and try to put out is that suicide is preventable, and that it's not the job of any one person, any one service, any one organisation. I think there is a perception to some extent by members of the public that people who complete suicide, I think there's this perception that the majority of them have some kind of, diagnosed psychiatric disorder, and they're known to psychiatric services, and that's not the case. The majority of people who complete suicide are not known to psychiatric services. They don't have a disorder. So that tells you that suicide is a public health issue. So what can you do to prevent it? And the message we try to put out is that what you can do to prevent it is it's no one person's job or one agency's job. Any single person, any citizen, any member of the public can prevent suicide. And what's really good about this StreetCones piece of work and the work between the guys is they demonstrate that. They demonstrate that any person sees somebody that they're concerned about, and they can stop and they can start talking to them. And that, in the case of the drama, obviously it's about two strangers, and people do that all the time. People intervene regularly, when they see somebody in public that they're worried about. But if you're worried about a family member, a colleague, a friend, then the advice is always to talk to them and ask them how they are. And if you are worried about them, really worried about them in terms of, they do seem very distressed, we do say it is appropriate to say, are you feeling suicidal? And if they say that they are, it's about not giving them all the answers, but it's about listening to them and connecting them to support. So whether that be accompanying them to the GP or staying with them to have a conversation with the Samaritans, or just letting them know that you're there for them, that you're there for them, and you will be there to talk to them about it. Now, obviously, there are support organisations that people can then be put in touch with, and there's peer support groups like MindtheMen. What we would say is, if anybody if they are at immediate risk of suicide, then you have to contact emergency services and get them help right away. But if they're not at immediate risk, then you talk to them. You try and find out if they say, yes, I'm feeling suicidal, try and find out if they've got a plan in place, and then, work to support them to help disable that plan and to make sure they follow a safety plan in the future. And the training helps people learn all that, but not people don't all need to go on the training. They don't need to be experts. They just need to, if they're worried about someone, talk to them and ask them how they're feeling and listen. Ask open-ended questions, not ones that get you yes and no answers. Open-ended questions as the person will open up more And if you establish that that's the way they're feeling, help connect them to support.
Yeah. Gary, do you want to weigh in on that one as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've always really covered that. You know, absolutely. You know, everything she's saying there is exactly what we would say. You know, what I would say as well is that, and this might sound strange, but people that are suicidal, most of them don't want to. It's about looking at other options, finding other options. You know, so sometimes people are sometimes fearful of asking the question because they think, oh, if I ask about suicide, it'll make them do it. That doesn't happen. That's not true. It's a myth. You know, so think about this. If you ask them, as Pauline said, if you got to a stage where you thought somebody was suicidal and they were showing the signs and they were very distressed, if you were to ask them if they are thinking about suicide, then they're going to answer yes or no. If they say no, then they'll know in the future that you're somebody they can come and talk to, who can support them, who's willing to listen to them, who cares enough about them. That's a good thing. If they say yes, and support them to get the help that they need. And that may be, you know, the emergency services there and then. So it's about being confident, and as Pauline said, anybody can do this. You don't have to be a specialist or an expert. There's some great training out there available. Some things at the moment available, for example, Public Health Scotland is the Ask Tell videos. If you can search these on Google, Ask Tell, and that talks about how to have a conversation, how to save a life, really simple 5-minute videos. And then once we get through the pandemic, there'll be other sessions available like Safe Talk, Suicide Awareness, Assist. There's various training courses that are going to be available again to help improve people's awareness and knowledge as well.
There, for anybody who's concerned about any of the things we're talking about, please write down some of the things that Pauline and Gary have pointed you towards, but also you've got information along the bottom of the screen there. So make contact, and if you have any questions for StreetCones or about what's been said, or you need to be reminded of what's been said, you can get in touch with us at mail@streetcones.org. So I think that was a really good discussion. I think we, out of this story has come so many benefits for the participants, but for the wider community. The very fact that we're sitting here, the 5 of us now, having this conversation, and that the people who are contributing and asking questions, it is opening up that dialogue, because I think that's what you've mentioned there, Pauline, and that's certainly something that I have felt in the past. I remember thinking if you brought up the subject of suicide, that in itself would be some kind of trigger, so you would avoid that. But I remember reading on the Samaritans website that it was quite the opposite, that by entering that into the lexicon and into the conversation, it was an opening for people to discuss, to talk about it. And like you said, if they hadn't made plans, it meant that if they were to in the future, you're somebody that they could speak to about it. And by having that conversation, it was actually an opening. It wasn't an invitation. But yeah, I think it's been a really powerful discussion. Has anybody got anything else they'd just like to add before we wrap up? Anybody got any burning things they'd like to say? I mean, Joe, I think you kind of answered this, but there was a great question from Kerry McGee on YouTube. Joe, how has this opportunity helped and benefited you? You've kind of said it, but if there's anything else you'd just like to add at the end that you can think of, that how this process has benefited and helped you.
Personally, I feel I've benefited from my own mental health, my own well-being. I've had a wee small journey. I know we speak about journeys, and I had a small journey with StreetCones through it, and I feel as if it stands me in a better place to understand my own mental health and maybe even help others around about me, friends, etc. and that, point them in the directions that they may need for external help. But it's very true what Pauline and Gary both said. It's all about the communication, just need to talk. It's not a hard thing to do, just open your mouth and speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good note to kind of wrap up on. So thanks everybody for tuning in, everybody who sent in questions, who had comments and kept the conversation flowing. Thanks for being here. Please take note of the information that's along the bottom of the screen. Get in touch with Gary at MindtheMen. or Pauline, get in touch with ourselves. Follow us, StreetCones, on Facebook or Twitter, @StreetCones. Follow us on YouTube, StreetCones channel on YouTube. Switch on your notifications and subscribe if you can. It's the best way to kind of stay in touch with us. All of our films and all of our videos and all of our previous live streams, we've got great live streams in there with the actor Paul Brannigan, with Paul Boggy last week, a couple of weeks ago, who wrote the book From Heroine to Hero. There's been some great live streams. Another one with Libby MacArthur and Karen McGlusky on community justice, criminal justice. That's a great podcast. So any information, all of our stuff is on streetcones.org. And if there are any other questions that are burning, get in touch with mail@streetcones.org, and we will endeavour to get back to you. But listen, thank you everybody, Stephen McVey, Pauline Toner, Gary McDonald, and yourself, Joe. It's been great having a chat with you. We will see you all again at some point in the real world, hopefully, not on the screen.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, all the best, guys. Take care. Bye.